When people think of I Love Lucy, one image towers above all the rest. Lucille Ball, glassy-eyed and tongue-tied, slurring her way through a bottle of Vitameatavegamin. It is the moment that made her the queen of television comedy, replayed for decades and etched into pop culture forever. But what most viewers never knew is that Lucy herself hesitated before stepping into that scene. She worried it would make her look foolish, even reckless, in an era when female stars were expected to stay glamorous and poised at all times. Sponsors were nervous, the script pushed boundaries, and the risks were real. So why did she say yes? What convinced Lucille Ball to gamble her reputation on one of the most awkward commercials ever filmed? In the spring of 1952, television was still a young medium, more experimental than established. Families gathered in their living rooms around black and white screens, often no larger than a suitcase, to watch programs that were figuring out the rules as they went along. Among these, one show had already begun rewriting the playbook, I Love Lucy. Produced with a live studio audience, filmed with multiple cameras, and featuring a husband and wife duo who were just as fascinating off-screen as they were on, the series was a phenomenon. Every Monday night, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz brought in millions of viewers, making the couple household names and pioneers of a new kind of comedy. By March 28th of that year, the cast and crew prepared to tape what would become one of the show's most talked-about episodes. Lucy does a TV commercial. The plot was deceptively simple. Lucy Ricardo, ever eager to break into show business, lands a spot pitching a health tonic called Vitameatavegamin. At first, she recites the script with the practiced sincerity of any model housewife. But there is a catch written into the copy. The tonic is supposedly loaded with vitamins, meat, vegetables, and minerals. Yet it also contains a hefty 23% alcohol. Each spoonful Lucy samples to demonstrate its delicious flavor brings her closer to comic collapse. For the era, it was bold. Alcohol was not usually played for laughs on mainstream television, especially when the central figure was a woman. Television sponsors held enormous sway over programming decisions, and the last thing anyone wanted was to alienate them. The wrong kind of gag could endanger advertising relationships and tarnish the carefully managed image of its star. Even with these risks, the writers knew the concept had the potential to be unforgettable. What audiences could not see that night was the tension humming behind the scenes. Would the scene make Lucy appear less like the polished leading lady viewers adored, and more like a slapstick clown who had lost control? Could one misjudged laugh undo the reputation she had spent years building? These were not abstract concerns. They were the questions Lucille Ball herself weighed as she prepared to take a chance in front of the cameras. But for all the risk, there was something in that setup, a perfect storm of character, timing, and daring that promised magic. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and Lucy stood at the edge of a gamble that could make or break her. In the spring of 1952, television was still a young medium, more experimental than established. Families gathered in their living rooms around black and white screens, often no larger than a suitcase, to watch programs that were figuring out the rules as they went along. Among these, one show had already begun rewriting the playbook, I Love Lucy. Produced with a live studio audience, filmed with multiple cameras, and featuring a husband and wife duo who were just as fascinating off-screen as they were on, the series was a phenomenon. Every Monday night, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz brought in millions of viewers, making the couple household names and pioneers of a new kind of comedy. By March 28th of that year, the cast and crew prepared to tape what would become one of the show's most talked-about episodes. Lucy does a TV commercial. The plot was deceptively simple. Lucy Ricardo, ever eager to break into show business, lands a spot pitching a health tonic called Vitameatavegamin. At first, she recites the script with the practiced sincerity of any model housewife. But there is a catch written into the copy. The tonic is supposedly loaded with vitamins, meat, vegetables, and minerals. Yet it also contains a hefty 23% alcohol. Each spoonful Lucy samples to demonstrate its delicious flavor brings her closer to comic collapse. For the era, it was bold. Alcohol was not usually played for laughs on mainstream television, especially when the central figure was a woman. Television sponsors held enormous sway over programming decisions, and the last thing anyone wanted was to alienate them. The wrong kind of gag could endanger advertising relationships and tarnish the carefully managed image of its star. Even with these risks, the writers knew the concept had the potential to be unforgettable. What audiences could not see that night was the tension humming behind the scenes. Would the scene make Lucy appear less like the polished leading lady viewers adored, and more like a slapstick clown who had lost control? Could one misjudged laugh undo the reputation she had spent years building? These were not abstract concerns. They were the questions Lucille Ball herself weighed as she prepared to take a chance in front of the cameras. But for all the risk, there was something in that setup, a perfect storm of character, timing, and daring that promised magic. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and Lucy stood at the edge of a gamble that could make or break her. If the Vitameatavegamin scene seemed spontaneous, that was only because Lucille Ball and her writers designed it with surgical precision. Nothing in Lucy's comedy was ever accidental. She rehearsed endlessly, drilled every beat, and treated physical comedy with the same seriousness most actors reserved for Shakespeare. To her, laughter was not luck, it was craft. The creative trio behind I Love Lucy, Jess Oppenheimer, Madeline Pugh, and Bob Carroll Jr., knew that Lucy thrived when given material that escalated step by step. Their scripts were never about random gags. They built frameworks where Lucy could start in complete control and then lose it inch by inch, letting the audience feel the unraveling in real time. With Vitameatavegamin, they wrote the copy like an actual sales pitch, simple, repetitive, and persuasive. Lucy then shaped it into comedy by deciding exactly when to let her tongue trip, when to blink too slowly, when to forget her lines, and when to push her spoon toward the audience as if offering a taste. Oppenheimer later explained that Lucy would often take a straightforward script and rearrange it, adjusting the rhythm so that each laugh landed with maximum force. In this case, she knew the danger was in overplaying the intoxication. If she went too far too fast, the audience would lose sympathy. If she underplayed it, the gag would fizzle. The brilliance was in the gradual decline, from a polished spokeswoman to a slightly confused pitchwoman, then to someone whose words betrayed her, and finally into a hilarious haze of misplaced sincerity. Each stage felt believable, because Lucy calibrated it down to the second. Her background in radio gave her another advantage. On My Favorite Husband, Lucy had performed routines where a sales pitch spiraled out of control. She understood the psychology of repetition, how hearing the same line over and over, with tiny shifts each time, could generate bigger laughs. By the time she was on stage with a bottle in hand, Lucy was not just playing drunk. She was orchestrating an audience's reaction, turning every stumble into fuel for the next laugh. The genius of the writers was in handing her the perfect vehicle. The genius of Lucy was in steering it exactly where it needed to go. Together, they transformed a risky idea into one of television's most carefully engineered moments of chaos. But this was not a brand new trick. Lucy and her team were borrowing from a formula she had tested before and proven to work. The Vitameatavegamin routine may look like a daring leap, but in truth, it was built on foundations Lucille Ball already trusted. Years before I Love Lucy, she had honed her timing in radio comedy. On her program, My Favorite Husband, written by the same team of Jess Oppenheimer, Madeline Pugh, and Bob Carroll Jr., Lucy often found herself caught in sales pitches or household demonstrations that spiraled into absurdity. The idea of a woman starting out composed, then slowly unraveling under the weight of her own enthusiasm, was a pattern audiences already loved. Radio had given Lucy the chance to experiment with rhythm. Without visuals, she learned how to let her voice betray confusion, how to pause just long enough to make listeners laugh, and how to escalate repetition until it became ridiculous. By the time she stepped onto the I Love Lucy stage, she already understood the comic power of watching confidence disintegrate. The Vitameatavegamin sketch was simply a bigger, bolder version of something she knew she could pull off. There was also a touch of vaudeville lineage running through the scene. Performers for decades had relied on bits where a straight-laced pitchman lost control of the product demonstration. Lucy, however, made the tradition her own. Unlike many slapstick acts of the past, she kept the comedy rooted in character. It was not a clown drunk on stage. It was Lucy Ricardo, ambitious, starstruck, and hopelessly in over her head, who could not resist proving she belonged on television, even as the tonic betrayed her. That layering mattered. It gave the sketch not only physical laughs, but also narrative depth. Audiences laughed at her tongue-tied delivery, but they also recognized Lucy Ricardo's endless hunger to be part of show business. Her collapse was both comic and tragic, funny and oddly relatable. The writers may have supplied the script, but Lucy injected it with that extra dimension of humanity. By re-engineering a formula she had tested in other media, she stacked the odds in her favor. What looked risky on paper was actually the product of years of fine-tuning. And once the structure was secure, the team obsessed over the smallest details to make sure the illusion played perfectly on camera. If the Vitameatavegamin routine still feels fresh 70 years later, it is because every detail was engineered for precision. Comedy of this sort is not only about performance, it is about the environment that supports it. For Lucy, the tools in her hands and the timing in her delivery were just as important as the lines on the page. The bottle itself became a character in the sketch. Rather than filling it with anything dangerous, the crew used apple pectin, a syrupy substance that looked convincing on camera but was safe enough for Lucy to swallow repeatedly. Its thickness gave her spoons of tonic a visual weight, catching the studio lights just enough to make audiences believe she was downing something potent. The gag about the tonic being 23% alcohol only heightened the tension, letting viewers imagine what might happen with every additional sip. The script's repetition also demanded careful staging. Each time Lucy raised the spoon, she faced the challenge of keeping the motion fresh. She tilted her head differently, widened her eyes at the wrong moment, or forced her smile into a stiff mask, as though still trying to sell the product. Even the way she smacked her lips was rehearsed, to fall somewhere between polite endorsement and barely concealed disgust. Every gesture layered another beat into the rhythm, carrying the audience forward. Timing with a live audience added another layer of difficulty. Unlike film, where edits could fix pacing, I Love Lucy relied on capturing the moment as it happened. Lucy had to feel the audience's laughter in real time, adjusting her pauses, so the next line landed after the chuckles had peaked, but before the room went silent. This live-wire connection was part of the magic. Each stumble of her tongue, each slurred syllable seemed accidental, but in reality, she was listening to the crowd like a musician listens to an orchestra. Props, pacing, and Lucy's unmatched sense of timing converged to make the scene irresistible. What could have been a one-note gag turned into a slow crescendo, building laugh upon laugh, until it became one of the most famous routines in television history. But even with all the rehearsal and technical safeguards, one question remained. Why risk it at all? What convinced Lucille Ball to put her reputation on the line for a scene that could easily have backfired? For all the rehearsal, all the craft, and all the safeguards, the truth is that Lucille Ball could easily have refused. Stars in the early 1950s had enormous control over their image, and most leading ladies of her generation would have balked at a script that made them look sloppy, awkward, or drunk. Lucy's instinct for self-preservation was strong. She knew exactly how fragile reputations could be in Hollywood, so why take the gamble? The answer lies in the way Lucille Ball thought about comedy itself. She did not see it as a lesser art, or as something to dabble in while clinging to glamour. She saw it as a discipline worthy of absolute seriousness. Every slip of the tongue, every crooked smile, every fall to the floor was an opportunity to show mastery. To Lucy, the Vitameatavegamin routine was not humiliation, it was proof. Proof that she could control the audience so completely that they would follow her from polished poise into delirious collapse, and still adore her at the end. She also understood something few performers of her era were willing to admit. Glamour fades, but laughter endures. By the early 50s, Lucy was already in her 40s, an age when Hollywood tended to push women aside. Reinventing herself as a fearless clown rather than simply a beauty queen meant she could extend her career. even dominate a medium that was still finding its stars. Saying yes to Vitameatavegamin was saying yes to longevity. There was another factor too, her iron confidence in preparation. Lucy was not the type to wing it. She drilled until mistakes became impossible. She rehearsed until the routine felt like muscle memory. That perfectionism gave her courage. She could take the risk on stage because she knew she had already built the safety net herself. Finally, there was the strategic calculation. Ball and Arnaz were not just actors, they were producers, staking their future on I Love Lucy. They needed to create moments so memorable that sponsors and networks could not ignore them. Vitameatavegamin was not only a gag, it was a headline generator, a scene people would talk about at the water cooler the next morning, ensuring the show's survival in a cutthroat industry. So the reason Lucy said yes was not recklessness. It was the opposite. She said yes because she recognized the power of the moment, trusted her craft, and was willing to gamble her image on the belief that great comedy could outlast any temporary discomfort. And when the cameras rolled, that gamble paid off bigger than anyone imagined. When the episode finally aired on May 5, 1952, the response was immediate. Millions of viewers erupted in laughter at Lucy Ricardo's slow unraveling, and critics praised the performance as a landmark moment in television comedy. Overnight, Lucille Ball was no longer just a sitcom actress, she was hailed as the first true queen of the small screen. What stunned people most was how effortless it looked. In just under 30 minutes of television, Lucy had convinced the audience that they were watching a character spiral into chaos while never losing her charm. The gamble that could have branded her foolish instead made her fearless. Far from damaging her image, it expanded it. She was no longer defined only by her beauty or her glamour. She was now celebrated as a comic genius, someone who could make the nation laugh while still holding on to dignity. The Vitameatavegamin routine quickly entered cultural shorthand. It was replayed in reruns for decades, studied in acting classes, and held up as the gold standard of television comedy. In later years, CBS even colorized the black and white episode to introduce it to new generations. Clips resurfaced in retrospectives, anniversary specials, and documentaries, each time reinforcing its place in American memory. The reaction inside the industry was equally telling. Sponsors who might have worried about the alcohol joke ended up thrilled by the ratings and the positive buzz. Writers and producers realized that Lucy's willingness to go all in on physical comedy gave them license to push boundaries further. Her performance set the bar for what sitcom stars could attempt and survive. And for Lucy personally, the aftermath was liberating. She had tested the limits of how far she could bend her image, and found that the public loved her more for it. In a single episode, she proved she was not just another actress riding the wave of television's rise, she was the engine driving it. Yet as beloved as the sketch became, it did more than just generate laughs. It cemented an identity, one that Lucy herself would carry for the rest of her career. As the years passed, the Vitameatavegamin routine became more than just a fan favorite. It became the single image that defined Lucille Ball in popular culture. When people thought of I Love Lucy, they did not picture glamorous gowns or romantic moments. They pictured Lucy at that podium, glassy-eyed, spoon in hand, struggling to pronounce Vitameatavegamin as if her life depended on it. The sketch's immortality is written into history in ways few comedy bits ever achieve. In Lucy's hometown of Celeron, New York, a statue was erected to honor her legacy. The first version became infamous for its eerie resemblance, or lack thereof, earning the nickname Scary Lucy. Years later, it was replaced with a new sculpture, one that captured her mid-Vitameatavegamin grin, cementing forever that this was the image people wanted to remember. It was not Lucy as a starlet, not Lucy as a beauty queen, but Lucy as the fearless clown who turned awkwardness into art. For Ball, that scene represented a turning point. By embracing the risk, she had transformed vulnerability into power. She showed that comedy could be sharp, physical, and female-driven without apology. She set the standard not just for women in comedy, but for anyone who wanted to prove that laughter could be as iconic as drama. And perhaps most importantly, she taught a lesson about risk itself. Sometimes the moments that feel most dangerous The ones that seem like they might shatter your image are the very ones that redefine it. Lucy trusted that instinct, and in doing so, she carved out a place in television history that no one has matched since. So the next time you see that famous scene, remember, it was more than just a gag about a funny-tasting tonic. It was a calculated gamble, a career-defining risk, and a reminder that even the most awkward choices can lead to timeless greatness. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story behind Lucille Ball's most legendary routine, make sure to subscribe and stick around. We have many more untold stories from Hollywood's golden era waiting for you, and trust me, you will not want to miss what comes next.